Hi, welcome back to the channel for all two of you who are watching. I did just want to touch base with anyone who might be following along about what's going on with my little medical journey and um, any updates that I have. This is later than I wanted to do it, but it is what it is. So I had my first appointment with neurology down at U of M, which is University of Michigan, um, July 20th. And um, that actually went really, really well. People listened to me. It was incredible. I built up a lot of tension. This was a follow up appointment. Well, hmm, let me take a step back. Okay. On July 20th, I had a really good appointment. They did an EMG, which is, where they like kind of zap your skin with the thing that looks like a barbershop taser. It's like, and then they like stimulate your nerves and stuff. They did one on my, and they only did my right arm and my right leg, and they didn't do all the muscles. They were specifically looking for Charcot-Marie tooth issues. And then they added to it when they discovered that there was so much radiculopathy in my legs. So they did a few more leg muscles than they originally intended, but they still only did one side because I was originally referred to U of M with neuropathy and suspected Charcot-Marie tooth. Um, so that's what the physiatrist up here, is it physiatrist? Anyway, she's a body doctor. Um, they're all body doctors. Um, anyway, that's what the lady up here ended up conferring with my PCP, and that's what they sent me down for. Um, and so they only did the right arm and the right leg, and they still took a while and did it very thoroughly. And they ended up doing like drawing 9 vials of blood because they wanted to check for several different genetic mutations, things of that nature. Um, and that came back um, the 120 apparently. They took 9 vials of blood to check all my genetic markers, all my like electrolytes, vitamin levels, metabolic levels, like so many things, like the test list that came in. It was like boom, 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 boom. And they were all in the normal range, except my B12 was just a little shy of normal. My vitamin E for some reason was really high. And they're like, well, quit taking vitamin E supplements. And I'm like, yeah, I've never taken a vitamin E supplement, so don't know what to tell you about that. Um, they had ordered when the doctor who is overseeing the fellows who are treating me, she's like the associate professor, one of the associate clinical professors of neurology down there. Um, she was examining my left leg and she's like, we need another MRI of this because it's worse than reported. And they never sent us the previous images, which don't even get me started. So I had some trouble bouncing around back and forth between the insurance company and the U of M hospital and the local hospital, Munson. Um, and eventually I finally got to, they were like, oh, there's no diagnosis code and we have the prior authorization, but we need the diagnosis code and just blah, 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 bureaucracy and red tape. Finally got it sorted so that on September 13th, I was able to have my lumbar MRI. It should have happened sooner. Um, and I did request a copy of all my MRI images on discs go to the doctors who are seeing me down at U of M, which is what they requested. They wanted the prior year and then the current year. And I also requested them to get all of my own MRI images on anything done for the past like 2 years, sent to myself via email, which I did get. Um, so October 12th, the day of the current, most recent U of M visit. We get down there. My appointment was scheduled for 4 p.m. We had to wait in the office. I am so sorry, I'm a rambler, guys. Um, we wait in the office, and um, after a while, they took my vitals, and she's like, "Oh, I guess the room isn't ready yet, so just sit here in the waiting room, and we'll get back to you." So I'm like waiting and waiting and waiting. It's almost 5 o'clock. And I went to ask one of the receptionist people there. I'm like, "Did you guys forget about me?" And they're like, "No, no, no, we still have you right here in the system." And I'm like, "Yeah, you guys forgot about me." So like the lead receptionist lady, she took me back and she's like, "Yeah, here's the room." And I was so upset by then, like just from nerves, because anybody who deals with chronic pain or chronic illness or anything, once you've been sort of traumatized, I mean, you don't even have to have chronic pain or chronic illness, really. Like, once you've been sort of traumatized or gaslit or blown off, um, meeting a new doctor becomes deeply anxiety inducing because, like, yeah, it's like getting bitten by a dog. One dog bites you, suddenly, yeah, you're going to be anxious around all dogs, particularly that breed, which is why I'm extremely anxious around ER doctors. Um, so I had been very anxious, and had already been exposed to a lot of like gaslighting and different things, over the summer and prior to my first appointment. So I was very nervous about meeting the new doctor. And, so and we were like like we weren't late to our appointment, we were early, but the appointment happened late. And the receptionist lady, so she's dropping me off in the office, and she's in the waiting in the room, the physical room, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm really sorry about the wait. He's very thorough, and some patients require more attention than others." And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm one of those patients. Okay, everybody deserves more attention, but I'm like, yeah, I'm a needy patient, I guess. Um, which I'm not proud of, but I do ask questions, and I like to be thorough, and I like to cover my bases. And so she dropped me off and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, thank you," starting to cry. So she sat with us for like 15 minutes. So I didn't see the doctor until like 5:15. And he came in and I handed him the timeline of things that I had typed up, you know, single space with like a double space between each event. And it was very clear to read, and, very careful about that, and very perfunctory, like, this event happened, this is how I felt. Like, not rambling as I am now, but just very as if this was a school assignment. And I did a summary, and I had my medications, and I made notes of things that had improved and with increases and decreases. I made notes of side effects with increases and decreases of gabapentin and other meds. And so I hand him that. And I also, sometimes when things are hard to explain, I use drawings. So I had drawings, little, to accompany, like, this is what the electricity felt, and this, like, in my body, this is what the zaps feel like, and this is where they go. Um, so the doctor, he was the other fellow who is practicing. Well, I don't know how many she has. Um, I have like the associate clinical professor lady that I see, and then and she has a couple of fellows under her. I don't know how many. I saw one, and then in July, and then I saw this other guy. So he was the other fellow, but it's still, they're both reporting back to the same neurology specialist. And she's still like overseeing all their work and everything. So, um, he's in there and he's like, "So, first thing, wow, it's almost 10 minutes in and I haven't even gotten to a point yet. I'm so sorry, you guys." Um, he's like, "First thing, we don't have your images. We never received the discs." I was so fucking pissed, you guys. Um, and I was so mad, um, that first of all, my local hospital, Munson, hadn't gotten on their job and done what they were supposed to do when I requested, because they got it to me. They got me the email images that I requested, but they didn't get the discs down to U of M. But I was also very frustrated with U of M for not being like, hey, your appointment's 10 days out and we still haven't received the discs. Do you want to like maybe follow up on that? Let me know. Like, oh my God. So I was pretty pissed, and I was able to pull up the images on my phone at least, and he was able like to glance at them, but I was very frustrated, like right off the bat, and started crying. And then the doctor, who again is a fellow, he's in his last year of schooling under someone else, he's still learning, um, very clearly whip smart, and it was professional, but at the same time, he was like, so what's the main thing bothering you today? And like what's the biggest issue? And my like sirens were going off even more. Like red flag, red flag, red flag. He doesn't care, you know. He just wants to focus on one problem, doesn't want to hear the whole thing. And so I was very upset, and I was like, you know what? I want to walk again. I want to be able to walk like normal again. I want to be able to walk outside and listen to podcasts or books on, well, I say books on tape because I'm an old person, okay? But audiobooks. Um, I was like, I'd like to be able to feel my hands again and control them again and type again. And, you know, I'm like, I guess that's, and he's like, well, where's the center of your pain? And we talked about it, and I'm crying. And he was he's like, do you need a minute? He was very professional in that, right? And um, here's sort of the highlights. And I'm going to try not to ramble too much. But um, they didn't have the images. Um, they wanted to refer me to um, neurosurgery to see if, like, because on their end, neuromuscular specialty, they couldn't really do anything more. They're like, yeah, we're kind of until we have more information. And I'm like, that's super awesome. Because they don't know what's causing my myriad of symptoms. And like, I get it. So they wanted to refer me to for another EMG, but this time much more thorough and on my all my limbs, and looking for different things. And I know, like, it kind of pisses me off because they could have done that back in July, but they didn't have, like, they were specifically looking for Charcot-Marie tooth and neuropathy related to, um, and the insurance companies basically rule the world. And so you have to have the proper, like, diagnosis code or suspicious code, or like, this is the reason we're doing this. We can't just be like, oh, we're going to be thorough the first time. They want to be like, okay, well, let's do the left leg. And so now they're going to do all my limbs. Now that they have a good enough reason to think they need to do all my limbs. They also, the Dr. Little, not the fellow, but the clinical professor, she's like, I still think you have Charcot-Marie tooth. I still think that it's just one of the really, really rare versions. She's like, what we looked at was 120 different genetic mutations, and they all came back negative. She's like, so I want to try to refer you to medical genetics so that they can get a full panel. Now, the panel that they pulled me from, looking for Charcot-Marie tooth, the one that had 120 different mutations on it, that test, if I were to pay for it, it cost $26,000. That was for 120 mutations. And I did not pay for it because it went through the university hospital. Thank God. I have enough to pay for. So she is referring me to medical genetics to try to get them, and just look at the whole panel and see if there's any genetic mutation that they can find. any type of Charcot-Marie tooth, no matter how rare. So I have not heard from medical genetics yet. They also wanted to refer me to neurosurgery because they were like, well, from our point of view, we don't really know how to handle this spinal issue. And also, we don't really know what's causing all these symptoms, these neuropathical symptoms that you're having. I don't know if that's a word. Um, but like the numbness, the tingling, the difficulty walking, like, are these neurological or are they hardware based and something that can be fixed if we can fix your spine? um, which um, I mean, I want that to be it. I want to be able to have it to be hardware based and get it fixed. And I mean, that would be the easier of the option, even as scary as it would be. Um, but that's a job for neurosurgery to figure out. They got to look at it and say, hey, how do we look at these herniations and this foraminal, I remembered the word, foraminal narrowing, and how do we approach it? Do we approach it with physical therapy and corticosteroids, or do we need to do different types of shots, or do we need to do physical therapy with something else? Do we need to do medicine? Do we need to go right into surgery? You know, so I haven't heard from the medical genetics yet. I haven't heard from neurosurgery yet. I have heard from the EMG people who want me down there for the full body EMG on December 11th. So we get to drive back down there. They also, for my, what do you call it? Seizures. They, um, they didn't do an EEG and they didn't want to do an EEG because he was like, well, an EEG would be more a predictor of if you have epilepsy or what would trigger an epileptic episode or something like that. And he's like, and it sounds like they're not typically regular and there's no real specific pattern. And I'm like, well, you know, and so they wanted me to do an inpatient stay from like November 7th to November 15th. Um, just like with electrodes and stuff. And I was like, guys, I have already burned through all of my PTO. I have used all my short-term disability, and we actually like have it where you can use PTO and borrow against the next year. And I've already borrowed like 16 hours against the next year. So like I don't want to use anything. And I was like, well, why do you need me for an inpatient thing? Why do we have to do this? And the doctor, he was trying to explain to me, he's like, well, I need to prove it's not epilepsy. And I'm like, I know it's not epilepsy. I mean, okay, theoretically it could be, I don't know. But the thing is I'm always conscious for my seizures. Um, I'm always conscious. I remember them, my eyes are open. So that's not typical of an epileptic type seizure. Um, at least the ones that are shaking my body. So they're like, he was like, well, there's another disorder that another thing that could be causing it, and we treat that with cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was like, no. And the next doctor who tries to tell me that I have conversion disorder, I think I'm going to slap a bitch. Yes, I have trauma from my past. Yes, I have trauma from living. Who the fuck doesn't? Um, life is hard. My body does not respond to trauma with seizures. This only started in the past year. Um, and it was a slowly escalating issue. And the worst of them have usually come when my body is at some level of exhaustion. So I can accept that if they say, yes, you're having maybe you're having seizures in response to your body reaching a certain level of stress and exhaustion, and it hits this peak and then it seizes because it's just everything's firing. I can accept that. I do understand that there is a correlation and causation between how your body is and how your mind is. I 100% on board. And so I asked him, like, I was like, so are you saying that my seizures are psychosomatic? Because conversion disorder falls under the umbrella of psychosomatic illnesses. And he's like, and I'm sitting here thinking, like, I'm not an attending asking you a trick question. Um, but maybe it felt like a trick question because I was like, no, I do not accept that my symptoms are caused by something psychosomatic. If it's my body reaching a point of like point of no return, you've got to stop, you need to take a break, and my body is doing something, I get that. But he was like, well, I want to do it because I need to prove it's not epilepsy. And I'm like, I don't, who do you need to prove it to? You don't need to prove it to me. Um, like if you had suspicion or a reason that you needed to exclude it diagnostically, then I would understand. But just to like, oh, I got to prove it's not epilepsy, like you don't need to because no one thinks it is. So for now, I have declined an inpatient stay because, believe it or not, the seizures are the least of my concerns. And if they get worse, or if they, um, I don't know, like if we, can't find answers anywhere else, or the seizures get worse, I will revisit it, and be willing to do an inpatient stay maybe in the spring. But this is, I can't right now. I can't afford to take any time off work. They are doing a cervical spine MRI because I mentioned, I was like, well, are we going to do a cervical spine MRI? And he was like, well, why? I mean, we would if your symptoms in your arms are getting worse. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, are you fucking listening? Like, I just said the symptoms are getting worse. And he's like, yes, yes. And I understand. I mean, I feel bad saying kid, but I mean, dude's in his 20s. I mean, he's very, very smart, very, very professional, was very compassionate, but he's also a student still, technically. And I think a little bit in that student frame of mind, and like he needed to present his answers in a scientific manner. And I'm like, dude, no. So he seemed, when I was like, well, okay, the lumbar MRI from September 2023 said it was significantly worse than the lumbar MRI from 2022 September. And he's like, oh, you had already previously had an MRI? Again, whip smart. Had I not been his last patient of the day, I'm sure he would have been more prepared. I was extremely frustrated with how unprepared he was. And I was extremely frustrated with how little attention he paid to my timeline because the previous fellow had that I saw back in July, she read it, went over it, asked insightful questions, things like that, confirmed things, clarified things. He just sort of kind of glanced at it. And then we talked about symptoms that I had mentioned in the timeline and events that I had mentioned in the timeline. And I was like, yes. He was like, oh, this happened when? And I was like, in August. I have a drawing. I highlighted it in the timeline. I have a drawing of it. So I was telling him, like, okay, so the lumbar MRI from 2023 noted that it was significantly worse than the lumbar MRI from 2022. So, and I'm asking him, should we do a cervical spine MRI again? Because it makes sense that if one has gotten significantly worse, the other may have gotten significantly worse, since my symptoms, both upper and lower body, have gotten significantly worse. And he was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And like, dude is tired. I'm sure. I'm sure he works like 1,000 hours a week. You know, it's not like I'm his only patient. I was the last patient of the day. Um, but I was very frustrated that he was not familiar and had not, I don't know, just by the way the day went, or because he was running so behind, or what happened. Like, if he would normally have taken 5 minutes to look at my file prior to our appointment, or if he would have just been winging it either way. Um, I feel like I would have rather have waited an extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes and had him take a moment to prepare himself and look at my file, or to even have him introduce himself, sit in there and say, I'm sorry the day's been hectic. Will you give me a minute to look at your file so I can familiarize myself with everything that's going on? I would have understood that, as opposed to just walking in and, yep, we don't have the images, and not really looking at the information I gave him, and then definitely not being familiar with my file and my history, because he was like, oh, you previously had an MRI. Yes, dipshit. Um, Again, nice guy. He's a kid, you know? And I was so tired, and my patience was wearing so thin. So, I did finally get everything sorted with the insurance, actually, just earlier today. So, I have my cervical spine MRI scheduled for later this month. And then get this is just like the end. I was Saturday was Sean's birthday, and late Saturday night, I ended up in the emergency room um for like lower back pain and some accompanying like abdominal pain and things like that. And like, I'm not going to go into it, but I believe I had posted a video earlier about I went to the urgent care because I had like lower back pain in my right side and it was really bad. And the guy was like, well, you're a big girl. You need to do yoga and lose weight. Pain is to be expected. That's part of life at your size. And then he tried to prescribe prednisone, which if he had even glanced at my fucking file, he would know I'm allergic to. Um, so it was like 2 days later, 2 or 3 days after that urgent care visit, that I ended up in the ER. And it turned out like, oh, actually, you have a kidney infection. And, um, like, I have, oh my God. Like, basically, everything in my gut was infected. Like, I am on antibiotics now. They sent me home with some, and tomorrow at work, I pick some up. Um, but like, yeah, basically, if it's down there in your intestinal bladder, kidney, between your belly button and my legs, like everything is infected. Um, so I was like, fuck that urgent care doctor guy. And I have felt like I've been run through some sort of like cookie dough press or something. Just like my whole body has been like wrung out, like squeezed, and then. And finally, the last update is I did get my car into the shop, and you don't want to hear about this. I did get my car into the shop. This is like the body channel. Got my car into the shop. Stop saying car in the shop. Um, and the rear brakes were metal to metal, as I suspected, which happened um October 12th when we came home from our last visit to U of M. As we were approaching about half an hour away from our home, um, they started really grinding. So I did like last week. It's like a week ago today. Um, they fixed those and they said the front brakes are at about 50% right now. So I paid them half and I still owe them another $235 for the rest of the brake work. I already paid $250. So, hey, if anybody wants to cover my brakes, $235. There's links to my PayPal. There's also the GoFundMe. I don't really expect anybody to pay for my brakes. Oh, life is shit sometimes, but you gotta find the humor. So, yeah, that's the update with my body. We have no answers. We have no nothing. The one good thing that has happened is they took me off the gabapentin and they put me on Lyrica. Um, and the Lyrica has seemed to really reduce the amount of electric zaps that I feel and the spasming and the seizure like type things. Um, it hasn't really done anything for numbing and tingling and pain per se, but it has gotten the electricity calmed down, I guess, a little bit. So that's where we're at. I am so sorry this is so long and so rambling. And my God, if you made it to the end, you are a champion. I hope you have a nice November. Thanks for watching.